It's finally here. The bracket in hand. The greatest, I think, 2-day stretch. Some people say four. I just prefer the Thursday, Friday, obviously. Saturday, Sunday's awesome too. But the greatest back-to-back 2-day stretch on the sports calendar for me, by far, the March Madness tournament. Joe, we're here. We got our bracket. We got a long night ahead of us. We're going to be cranking out an episode for each region. You and I on this first one, our first one of many of the night, hitting the South region. In this one, we'll be hitting the Midwest, we'll be hitting the West, we'll be hitting the East, joined by some guests on some other episodes. But Joe, as we said, we got the bracket. It's good to have it printed out in front of my face and ready to attack this week.
This is, I think, I do agree, the best 2-day stretch. But from Sunday to when the bracket comes out to Sunday after that last game, this is the best week of the sports year, because as much fun as the first 2 days of the games are, you know how much fun it is from Sunday to Thursday before those games, arguing about every single game, going way too deep into bracket analysis for stuff that ultimately, I'm going to have a great time predicting all these games, but I have no clue what's going to happen. Like if I told you 2 years ago my Final Four was going to be FAU, San Diego State, Miami, and UConn, you would have had me sent to an asylum. Like, no one could have predicted that. That's the best part about this tournament, and it's going to be so much fun over these next couple of days. We'll have you covered here with every single region, every single game, and I can't wait.
Yeah, it's I saw Big Cat tweeted already. Like, my brain is already overflowed with bracket knowledge. It gets to the point where it's like, all right, I listened to stuff overnight. I listened to stuff on the drive into work today, and then I got into work and I just filled out my bracket. I just printed it out. That's my bracket. I'll maybe bet some different things based off of some stuff that I read, but or listen to and whatnot throughout the week. But just went gut reaction, full out, and this is the one I'm sticking with. I like what I finished up with. As we said, we'll go through every single region, give you the ins and outs of each matchup, and yeah, looking forward to it. So South region, we'll start there at the top left. Our next episode will be on the West, bottom left. Then we go to top right with the East, and then we'll be finishing with the Midwest. So kind of chronological order there. We started out with number one Auburn, the number one overall seed. Lost 3 of 4 down the stretch. Some people were arguing that it should have been Duke to get that that number one overall spot, but it does get rewarded to Auburn after a 29-5 year. I think the entire body of work, that's the term that gets thrown around a lot, that gets tossed around a lot. That fits Auburn to a T. Like, sure, they lost 3 or 4 games down the stretch, but you could see, like, the committee didn't really value, at least, the tournaments that much, with a team like Michigan getting a 5 after winning the Big Ten tournament. A team like Louisville even being an 8 seed, and they were in the ACC title and lost to the number 2 overall seed in Duke. Like, this is a flaw, I think, right now in the system. Kind of like, all right, what's the benefit of playing these teams in the conference tournament unless you're like literally playing for your tournament life? Like, Cooper Flag could have been lost for the season. What's really the benefit for that of Duke if they were always going to be the number 2 overall, or the number 1 overall seed? Like, it doesn't kind of make sense there. So there might have to be some tweaks down the line, or a little bit more transparency, but Auburn sticks in there at number 1. They'll be playing the winner of Alabama State and St. Francis, PA in the tournament for the first time. That'll be Thursday, 2:50 on CBS. Before we get into what your thoughts are on Auburn, Joe, and if you're buying that they could actually make a run at the Final Four out of this region, give me your winner real quick on Alabama State and St. Francis.
So I'm going with Alabama State. On my flight home yesterday I went from Nashville to Chicago, then Chicago back home to Connecticut. On the flight back home from Chicago, they had the TV on and I had ESPN on, and it said Alabama State was 5th in the country in the least amount of turnovers. Like, they were top 5. And I think that's, if you can, not turn the ball over, that's very big, in the tournament. And for a game like this against a St. Francis team that did have a losing record, I think Alabama State will get that win and move on to play Auburn in the round of 64. And where I think Auburn will win, by the way.
Yeah, I'll roll with Alabama State as well. That's a 4.5 point spread, over under 139.5. Might look to take the under in that matchup. St. Francis, as we said, under 500. Central Connecticut ran that conference. It was a shame they didn't win the title, but the way that they didn't win the title is St. Francis really kind of controlled the tempo and made that game super low scoring. It was low 50s or high 40s, I think, at the end. So that's where St. Francis kind of got hot a little bit. They were able to dictate the tempo, but I think the under of 139.5. If you're going to make me make my first official play of the March Madness tournament, that's what I'm going to look for in that one. So we both got Alabama State moving on to play Auburn in that first game for Auburn. Just give me your thoughts overall kind of on that matchup, Joe. How bad you think Auburn will ultimately beat them? We came on here a few years ago and said Purdue versus FDU would be the biggest
Yeah.
blowout as well of the first round, and we saw what happened with that. So just give me your thoughts on Auburn, and I guess big picture-wise, are you concerned that they lost those 3 out of 4 games down the stretch, or do you think that overall body of work kind of shows you that this is still a Final Four worthy team?
Yeah, this is a team that's still worthy of being in a Final Four, and I think this game will actually be the perfect like, hey, get right spot. They got upset in the SEC semis. Maybe having that extra day of rest, who knows? We'll get to Florida later on in the night, but maybe get the next day of rest, is all the motivation they need. Because I will say, when I did my initial gut reaction, bracket, um, I was looking, thinking about, it was a little concerning how Auburn finished the year. But honestly, I mean, this is perfect motivation. You know what I mean? Like, hey, you guys got the number one overall seed, but people are saying you don't deserve it. You guys lost in the SEC semis. People are asking how good, how bad you really want it. Well, now you can go out and start the tournament out right, beat well, whoever it is. I'm saying Alabama State, but you can beat Alabama State up, win that game by 30, 40 points, and then you move on where you're gonna have to, you could say you're being disrespected again, especially if, we'll talk about Louisville and Creighton in a second, especially if Louisville wins. That game's in Lexington, Kentucky. It's gonna be a Louisville home game. So,
Yep.
you can take that as all the motivation you need, in my opinion, and I think Auburn will be able to get this one done with ease. If not, if it gets to a point where they only win by like 10 points or less, like, and it's close, then you got to start having the conversation of what's wrong with Auburn.
Yeah, when you look at Auburn, I said it 2 weeks ago when I was talking to Brace. It was like even if Auburn lost their last 3 games of the regular season by 20 plus points and then lost their first game in the SEC tournament, I still thought that they were going to be the number one overall seed. After they clinched that SEC title the previous Saturday before it, I forget who it was, but then they lost to A&M, they lost to Bama. That was still a team that was going to be the number one overall seed. You just look at their resume compared to a team like Duke. I know Duke beat them, but that game was at Duke. Auburn just had so many more high quality wins over the course of the season. Auburn really didn't have that much to play for technically. Sure, it would have been nice, like historical wise, to have a better record, but still, that was a team that was already locked into their spot. Can they turn it back on though? Is the major question. I still think you have to trust them in their total body of work. They don't have any major injuries right now. Broom, I know, has been in and out of the lineup over the past month or so, a couple times with some shoulder and some ankle injuries, but still, this is a really good, experienced Auburn team. And also, Joe, I think take into account last year, early exit to Yale. Like, that's a team that they were 4 seed last year, and that was a major upset. Yeah. And this is a team that is going to be coming back with some more motivation. Won the SEC regular season in what we've called the best conference in college basketball history. 14 teams made the conference or made the NCAA tournament from that conference. It goes to show you something at least there. So give me Auburn to make some noise out of this region. We'll get at the end our Final Four pick out of each region, but I'm definitely going to have Auburn win this one. I think they're being a little bit slept on and disrespected. So we both got Auburn moving on there, previewing that first matchup. Then we go to the first game of the NCAA tournament. One of my favorite things when the bracket comes out is to look at the matchups and be like, all right, which game is going to be first each day? And shout out to you on this one. You sniped this one. Number 8, Louisville, 27-7. They'll be playing number 9, Creighton, 24-10. As you said, this one is in Lexington, Kentucky. So a de facto home game for Louisville and potentially a home game against number 1 Auburn in round 2 if those two teams meet up. But this is your first game on Thursday, 12:15 on CBS, a game that I think we'll see a pretty even split, maybe 55-45 in favor of one way, but you're going to get a bunch of those tweets or a bunch of those notifications like only X amount of perfect brackets left after, because this is going to be a pretty even split. So a really good game, I think, to start the tournament. Louisville's a 2.5-point favorite right now, over under 145.5. Who you like to win in this matchup?
Yeah, my initial like knee-jerk gut reaction was Louisville. So for now, I'm going to stick with Louisville. I've already flipped on this game though, like 5 or 6 times, like a majority of the 8-9s. That's just how it always is. This is a very close game. I'm going with Louisville to win this game. I think the fact being at home, um, and ultimately Kalkbrenner's great, but at the end of the day, I think Louisville with Hepburn have the better guard play. to kind of advance out of this first round and move on to the round of 32, where I would assume they'll be playing Auburn.
Yeah, this is one, like I said, I could definitely be swayed either way. But just want to give a quick shout out to Louisville. 6-5 start to the year. They finished 21-2 rest of the way with a loss in the ACC championship to Duke. That's nothing really to be upset about. A team that was the laughing stock of major conference basketball the past 2 years. Pat Kelsey, I think, deserves to be the national coach of the year for the turnaround that he did in just one season to remake this roster and all the injuries that they had in the meantime. Pretty amazing stuff. And if he's the guy that stays at Louisville long term, which for hopefully Louisville fans' sake that he is, the future is looking very bright there. I think I could see them, like, I have more confidence in Louisville going forward than North Carolina to be kind of the 1 and 2 with Duke there at the top. People are upset with their seed, but I think the same thing can be argued about Duke for not being the number 1 overall seed. It's like goes back to your overall body of work. They just didn't really play anyone really over that kind of 23 game stretch where they changed their season. They had one win over a ranked team in that time, and that was just this past weekend against Clemson in the ACC tournament on Friday night. I think they're a solid squad, but I do think that record's a little bit inflated, and I think that they took that into regard with the seeding, like putting this team at an 8. Maybe they deserve to be a 5 or a 6 or something based off if you look even like their ranking in the AP top 25. They're two different entities, but the overall metrics and whatnot, I just don't think this Louisville team's as good as this 27 in record. Creighton, on the other hand, very experienced. Kalkbrenner, I think we can make the argument that outside of Doug McDermott, the best player in Creighton history, don't think this team's going to make a run to the Final Four, national championship, or anything like that. But Ryan Kalkbrenner to get one final win in the NCAA tournament, I think that's another kind of good mark on his resume, cement himself as a definite top 5 in the history of Creighton basketball. So I like Creighton to win this one, plus 2.5. Definitely going to take that and probably take the money line as well. Ryan Kalkbrenner, I think, is kind of the major difference maker in this one in the paint with his defense. And also, I don't really think Louisville is going to be able to match up with him on the low block. So give me Creighton to move on to play Auburn in the next round. All right, one of the most popular upset picks, Joe, and I'm interested to see what you say about this matchup because this reminds me of like Charleston a couple years ago that we talked about that everyone was picking them as an upset. Last year, I feel like a lot of people were picking Grand Canyon as an upset. That wound up coming through. So this is definitely going to be one of the most publicly picked ones. Number 5, Michigan at 25-9, just coming off a Big Ten title. They will be playing number 12, UC San Diego out of the Big West, the first time they're in the NCAA tournament, 30-4. And the wild thing about this game, Joe, Thursday night, 10 p.m. on TBS. This is going to be everyone obviously out all day at the bars, wherever you're at watching the NCAA tournament, betting on games. People are going to have a lot of money, I think, invested on this game at the end of the night. Michigan minus 2.5 only, over under 141.5. The number I think I saw open at 4.5, already down to 2.5 here.
Yeah. You're in a bad spot when you have a take and then Seth Davis immediately says it on live TV because I texted, I think you guys and then my other group from home right when this came out. I said UC San Diego is going to the Sweet 16. 30 seconds later, Seth Davis said that, and I wanted to throw my phone across the room because now I don't think it's going to happen. But I'm still sticking with this is my big upset pick, even though it's really not. Considering the fact it's only a 2.5 point spread, and if you look at I hate getting real analytical, but on Ken Palm, UC San Diego is the 36th ranked team in the country. Michigan's 25th. Like Michigan ran through the Big Ten tournament, then they got screwed with a 5 seed, having to play on paper probably the best of the 12 seeds. Like UC San Diego is a very good team. They do a very good job of taking care of the ball. I'm saying his first name wrong, but Tate Jones, he's the guard for UC San Diego. He is very, very good. At one point, Ken Palm does like his player of the year rankings as well. I think he was like 8th or 9th, which is just insane for someone from, like the Big West, like a small mid-major conference to be like regarded as that good. He's been great. And the way UC San Diego forces turnovers and Michigan likes to turn the ball over, I think that's going to be a big key. Now, this also reminds me of, I think it was Bama Charleston a couple of years ago when everyone was like, Charleston loves to play quick. This is the perfect matchup for him and lost. This is like the perfect matchup for UC San Diego. This is definitely going to be the most popular 12-5 upset pick. I'm picking it, and I feel like a sucker doing it, but I'm still going to stick with the Tritons because I think they're a very good basketball team, and I would love to see them, if they can get out of this first round, because I think they could make a little bit of noise.
Yeah, I'm upset that this game is this late. Like, I wish this was like even this maybe be the first game of the tournament, or at least in the afternoon window. This is going to be, we're already 10 hours in at this point. Probably going to be memory is going to be a little bit fuzzy with this one, and I'm upset because I think this has a chance to be one of the best games of the tournament. But when you look at this, you kind of go into the stats and whatnot. You were kind of touched on it, but one team with UC San Diego, they force the second most turnovers in the country. Michigan, they are 328th worst team in the country when it comes to turning the ball over. So there's a clear mismatch in that regard that you can point to and be like, this is a perfect reason why San Diego can pull off this upset. The tallest player, though, on UC San Diego, only 6'10", pretty decent size there, but he only plays about 5.5 minutes per game. He's not a key cog on that team. You look at the rest of the front court, 6'7", 6'8" type guys. They do not have the size, I think, up front to stop Golden and Wolf. And in the Big Ten tournament, Michigan cleaned up their turnover problems a little bit. Only 6 against Purdue and 8 against Wisconsin. They did have 19 against Maryland, but they still found a way to win that game. So even when they did turn the ball over a lot, they still found a way to beat a Maryland team that people are very high on as well. Michigan has also won 12 games this season, decided by 5 or less. So if it's a close game down to the wire, it's a team that's been in these spots before. UC San Diego dominated their conference, and you can kind of look at that either side of the fence. But if this is a tight game down the stretch, Michigan is experienced in winning those type of games. Experienced coach with Dusty May, 2 key players with tournament success in Danny Wolf and Vlad Golden as well. I'm going to go against the norm here. I think this is one where everyone's zigging. I'm going to zag on this one and take Michigan to win. I'm going to take them to cover, and I think they're actually going to win this one pretty comfortably. It might be if all goes well on Thursday, maybe even do like an alternate spread type of situation on this one. I really like Michigan to advance and go to the round of 32. All right, we go to the SEC versus the Ivy League. It was a matchup that we had last year. Last year was with Auburn getting upset by Yale. This year it's Texas A&M as a 4 seed, 22-10, up and down year for Texas A&M. Sometimes they look awesome. They go beat Auburn. Then they will wind up losing to Texas in the SEC tournament. Which version of Texas A&M shows up is going to be very interesting. This is a Texas A&M team that was like number 8 in the country just under a month ago. So what version of A&M do we get remains to be seen in this tournament. A very experienced squad in their own right. They'll be playing number 13 Yale back to the tournament, back-to-back years, looking to pull off another upset. 22-7 out of the Ivy League. This is a pretty good tip-off time. Thursday, 7:25 on TBS. A&M comes in as a 7.5-point favorite, over under 140.5.
This was part 2 of my damn Seth Davis just said exactly what I said, because I also had Yale, and I'm going to be sticking with the Bulldogs winning this game. I think this is a very good spot for Yale. A&M up and down, like you said, kind of, coming back down to earth as the season went on. Yale's been very good this year, as always. And it's gotten to a point, who knows if Yale will win, but I'm definitely going to take them the cover against A&M, because the Ivy League teams usually do play pretty well. Obviously, they're never going to be the most athletic team on the floor. I'm not trying to take away and say that Yale is the better team. Like, if you put Yale, obviously, in the SEC, they're not going to do what A&M did. Wade Taylor is maybe one of, like, if you're talking about, like, in terms of a guy that is most important to his team, you could argue he's the most important player in this tournament, because he's what makes A&M go. And, if he has a bad game, I like Yale's chances. So I'm going to go with Yale to pull off this upset. This is one of my 2, spoiler, I have a second 13 seed winning, which we'll get to later on in the night. But I'm going to go with Yale winning this game. Ultimately, the Ivy League teams, I just like to plug and play those spreads. Think they can get it done because, like I said, A&M has been up and down, and you really don't know what A&M team you're going to get. So if this is the A&M team that can beat Auburn, Yale doesn't have a shot. But we've seen A&M look very vulnerable at times, and this is a pretty solid Yale team.
Yeah, I love what you said about Wade Taylor in terms of kind of he's what makes A&M go. He can be very inefficient. Like, he's kind of got like that Caleb Love factor to him, where it's like, all right, he's going to go out there and shoot the ball 20 to 25 times. He's going to get his shots up. His field goal percentage only 35.4%. Not a very efficient player, but they don't really have that much offense outside of him. So he has to take a lot of these shots. But he had a crazy performance against Texas, 42 minutes. He only shot 27.8% from the field, but he was able to get 29 points because he went to the free throw line nearly 20 times. Like, he's going to get his shots up. He's going to get his points. How efficient does he do it, though? That might honestly be the determining factor on whether or not Texas A&M is able to win. This is a spot though I really like Yale for the cover. I don't know if I'll wind up betting them outright. I like Texas A&M to win the game. I think this is kind of a bit of a toss up for me, but I definitely like Yale to make this a ball game and cover that 7.5. Yale is one of the teams equipped to actually match up with Texas A&M. Yale is 18th in the country in defensive rebounding per game. As we know, anytime you watch an A&M game, all they do is crash the glass. They're not the number one team in the country in offensive rebounding per game, averaging 16.1 rebounds per game. And that can kind of go into the Wade Taylor effect as well. Like Buzz Williams, basically like, dude, you got the green light whenever, take shots, because even if you miss them, we have a very good, the best team in the country when it comes to offensive rebounding. We're going to crash the glass hard, and we're going to make teams pay if they're not boxing us out and being physical. But Yale is one of the few teams in the country equipped to actually match up with A&M. So look there for a potential upset. Yale was here last year as well, as we talked about, knocking off Auburn in that 4-13. This is certainly one to keep an eye on. But give me Wade Taylor to will the Aggies to victory. I think it could come down to maybe a buzzer beater. This game has maybe even overtime kind of vibe to it, I think. Last year I said it with Northwestern and FAU, and we got overtime in that one. I think this one is a game that I'm keeping an eye on for potential overtime bet as a little fun action. So give me Wade Taylor at the end to kind of pull through, maybe pull out some heroics out of his sleeve. But I am going to have the Aggies move on, but I am really liking Yale to cover in this matchup. All right, we go to number 6, Ole Miss at 22-11 out of the SEC. They will be playing the winner of the first play-in game, which is San Diego State and UNC, the 11 seeds here in the South region. This matchup will be on Friday at 4:05 on TNT. And we'll start at the top there, Joe, with UNC was the most, I think, ridiculed team that made it in the NCAA tournament, the one that's been getting the most flack, obviously, with the AD being the chairman of a very interesting kind of situation there. But UNC or San Diego State, who do you like in that one? And what after? Yeah, we'll get into your pick for that first.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm going with UNC because San Diego State is a team. I was listening to a bunch of podcasts. They were starting to talk about San Diego State on one of them, and it was actually a Terrence Oglesby, shout out Field of 68. He was saying, because he announced a couple of those games here, and he goes, I kind of just get the vibe that that's a team that's just kind of packing up and looking ahead to next season. And they kind of showed that, in the Mountain West tournament, Boise beat them in the first round. They kind of bowed out early. And this is San Diego State team. I just think talent wise, like as bad as inconsistent as UNC has been, they're still Carolina, and it's always that team that's going to get the most flack for not being in. People are going to be saying, "Oh, UNC shouldn't be here. This is ridiculous. This is BS." They're going to wind up beating San Diego State and moving on, and they're going to be like, "Oh, what do you got to say now?" You know what I mean? Like UNC. I don't understand how their metrics were so high, like their net ranking and KenPom, because when they played all these really good teams, they lost. But we can argue about who's in, who's not another day, because I think at the end of the day, you get, your 20, 30 minutes where you can argue about, West Virginia, who I personally didn't like. I tweeted out, Cole, you saw, I was like, how can we say this West Virginia team is safely in? I didn't think they were going to miss the tournament, but I was shocked, when people were projecting them around like the 8-9 line. But like the West Virginia governor is going around saying he's suing the NCAA. He's going on podcasts and stuff, like insane. But
you lost to Colorado, the 16 seed in the first round. If you win that game, you might be in.
I think they would have. I really do. I think they would have.
They might have been flipped.
Yeah, I think they would have honestly booted out UNC in that case because, the committee kind of proves that they stopped watching the games after Friday. But UNC is going to win the first 4, and I have Ole Miss beating UNC. And if I'm being honest, out of every single game in the first round, this is the one I am least looking forward to. This is the one, we're going to be down in Atlantic City at the sports book. I will probably pay attention to the least out of like that window of 4 games. This is just not a game that I'm excited for because I don't like this UNC team. I don't think they're good. If San Diego State wins, same thing. I don't think they're that good this year. Ole Miss is a team that's been kind of blah. And granted, the SEC is very, very good. No one's taking that away from them, but like I'm not a big believer in this. Like I don't think Ole Miss is that great. Like whoever wins this game, I think is going to lose to Iowa State in the next round. But that being said, I'll go with Ole Miss just because at the end of the day, even though out of these 3 teams, I don't like any one of them, I'm going to go with Ole Miss, the team that's like more battle tested in their conference to advance.
Yeah, in the playing game, the number is 4.5. UNC's favored by over under 142.5. I think I'm gonna take San Diego State to cover in that one. I certainly think there's a chance that they win this game, but I do agree with you too. Like UNC is the team that has been bashed on. They could certainly use that as some motivation. UNC played really well down the stretch against teams that weren't named Duke, and I know Cooper Flag didn't play this past week, but other than the Duke game, I think they've the two Duke games. I think they won like 9 of their last 11, and their only 2 losses were to Duke. So this is a team that's been playing, you can argue, their best basketball. And I do think if they win that game, there's a chance that they upset Ole Miss as well. I am going to take San Diego State, I think, to cover the plus 4.5. I'm not really in love with a play in that game, but I do like UNC to win against San Diego State and then move on to play Ole Miss. I've not been a believer in the Ole Miss team for a lot of the season. They're a team that I feel like I've watched a ton of, like Tuesday or Wednesday nights. They seem to always be on our TV in one way or another. I love Chris Beard, the coach, but I still think this team isn't that talented, and it could just have to do with in the SEC they were just kind of a middle of the pack team. Maybe if they were in the ACC, like they would have been what Louisville was or something like that. It might have just been the product of playing in the SEC, but I'm just not in love with that Ole Miss team. I think this, if it is Ole Miss versus UNC, I think it has a potential to be close. Ole Miss this year, games decided by 5 or less, was looking earlier, 4-4 in those games. So really a kind of a coin flip. But those wins were over Grambling, LSU, South Carolina, and then they had one good win, which was senior night against Tennessee. That was like kind of a gotta have it game for them, a game that they were probably safely in, but they were on a bit of a losing streak and they needed a win. But their other 3 wins against Grambling and then the bottom 2 teams in the SEC, not a very encouraging performances by me, from me, at least in that regard. I just don't really trust them in a close game, and I think they're actually going to get bounced in round 1. So give me UNC not just to beat San Diego State in the playing game, but also to win their first round matchup there against Ole Miss and send the 6 seed home packing early. All right, this is Joe. You were just talking about the game that you probably care about the least. I think this is the game I care about the least. That just looking at the bracket, there's one more in the kind of the bottom left that it's not really catching my eye either. Obviously, going to still be invested in one way or another. But number 3, Iowa State at 24-9 versus number 14, Lipscomb, 25-9 out of the Atlantic Sun. Friday, 1:30 tip on TNT. Iowa State minus 14.5 in this one. Over unders 143.5. What are your thoughts on this game? And any chance Lipscomb pulls off the upset?
Yeah, Lipscomb was one of those teams I was seeing, before the bracket came out, as people were like, hey, keep an eye on, this team to potentially make a run. They are a pretty good team out of the ASUN. Even without Keyshawn Gilbert, though, Iowa State, I think they're going to win this game. 14.5 might be a little bit much just because Iowa State does, still like to slow it down at times. So I don't know about a spread yet, but I think the Clones won't really sweat this one. I think they'll move on to the round of 32 and, take down Lipscomb.
Yeah, this is a game like I said, kind of not that involved with. Don't really have that much to say about. I think Iowa State's going to win. I will say, just big picture wise, kind of feel bad for Iowa State because when healthy, they were awesome. Were they number 1 at one point, or were they number 2?
I know they hit number 2. I don't know if they were briefly number 1, or there might have been like that week they won a big game on like a Thursday, but then Saturday they got upset or something like that. Like they were right there though.
Yeah, but it was looking like a historic season for them, and they just fell apart with injuries. Like one guy would get hurt, one guy would come back, another guy would get hurt. They just were never able to kind of get fully back on the same page. If they're able to retain that roster and obviously add some people in the portal, that this could be an Iowa State team that enters the season maybe even at like number 1 in the country. Obviously, a lot of changes happen with the portal nowadays, but that's a team that I think we could confidently say will enter as a top 5 as long as they don't lose any of those major pieces. I like them to win this game. The bet in this game, I might go Lipscomb plus 14.5. Still a pretty easy win there if you're Iowa State by double digits. Lipscomb can really shoot the 3 ball well. And we saw what BYU was able to do to Iowa State last week, scoring all those points in that kind of crazy game. But I think Lipscomb to cover the 14.5 is probably going to be the play in this one. But the game I might be just the least excited for outside of kind of like the 116 matchups. All right, 2 more matchups here in the South region. We go to number 7, Marquette, 23-10. This is one I'm really looking forward to. Versus number 10, New Mexico, 26-7 out of the Mountain West. 2 at-large teams here. 7:25 tip on Friday night on TBS. Marquette's a 3.5-point favorite. Over-under is 152.5, Joe. I like this one to be a track meet. What are your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, Coyle, I think this is going to be a very exciting game. And it's kind of that perfect time slot. You know what I mean? Like Friday, the 7:30, the night window's fully in effect. You're starting to come down, starting to get to the end of the crazy, roller coaster that is the 2 days. I think this game is going to be very, very fun. I have Marquette advancing here. I do think it will be close, though. I think I'll take New Mexico plus the 3.5. I do think it will be within 3 points. And it wouldn't shock me if New Mexico ended up winning this game, but I am going to go with Marquette advancing here. I just think Cam Jones is going to be the best player on the floor. I think he's going to make the plays when they need to late. I think they'll be able to get it done against New Mexico. Might be, if you, I'm going to look at all these games. Like, remember, like Luke last year was saying, oh, St. Mary's, they have to go to overtime. This is
Mhm.
a game I think I might sprinkle on to go to overtime. I don't know why I feel that way. I just have that feeling in my gut. This is going to be, a really good game, really close. So I think this will be my game. I bet to go to overtime in the first round with Marquette pulling it out.
Yeah, I could see that being in the cards as well. I think this is going to be a really close one. I really like the over, though. This is one where I'm looking at a track meet. It might be like the first one to 80 or 85 points wins this game. New Mexico is sixth in the country in terms of pace of play, according to Haslam Metrics. Marquette is 173rd, so it doesn't really scream that fast of a pace, but they can still score. Marquette had 80 or more in 14 games this year, and they averaged 76.9 points per game. So two teams that can really score, and two teams that have elite shot makers in Cam Jones on Marquette and Donovan Dent on New Mexico. Anytime someone's going to mention this matchup throughout the week, that's what they're going to say. It could come down to who has the ball last between Cam Jones and Donovan Dent. Those guys might just go back and forth kind of for the last 5 minutes of the game, and the defensive game plan is going to be just, get the ball out of this guy's hands at all costs on both sides. I think this one is one where the dog is certainly live. I am going to take Marquette, but I am going to look at New Mexico to cover. I wind up just making one play on each game. I'm going to go with the over of 152.5 in this one, though. I think this one's like 84 to 82, something in that ballpark, and we get a high-scoring game. But I am going to take Marquette to move on to play the winner of our final matchup of the South region that we'll break down for the first round. And that's number 2, Michigan State at 27-6, coming out of the Big Ten, the regular season champ. Lost on Saturday to Wisconsin in the Big Ten tournament. They will be playing number 15 Bryant out of the America East, 23-11. Friday, 10 o'clock tip on TBS. Michigan State, 17.5 point favorite, over under 150.5. And I don't have any 15 seeds beating any 2 seeds or any 16 seeds beating any 1 seeds, Joe. But every year when the bracket comes out, I look to identify the one that I could potentially see it happening. And I think if you had to make me pick one, I would be picking Bryant over Michigan State. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, Coyle, it's funny you say that because I was texting my friends from home because they were talking about Bryant because they were watching the game. Um, and I said, I'm like, if there's like, no matter who Bryant plays, I'm automatically taking that spread. I know, obviously, I've said a million times I keep fading Sparty and I keep losing money, but I have to. I'm a man of my word. I'm going to be taking Bryant plus the 17.5 right now. Michigan State's going to win the game. I'm not saying they're going to lose, but I do think Bryant is a very fun team. I think they'll, be able to keep it within the number, even if it's one of those like they're down 25 and their starters are playing against, the bench guys for Michigan State and they make it, like a 15-point game to end it. But I do think Bryant will be able to keep it within the number. Michigan State, though, will advance.
Would be a very funny end to the week or the 2 day stretch there with that being the Friday night at 10 o'clock game. I think there would be, was that the last tip or would there be one more tip after that?
Let me look. If it's close to it, if not the last one. For Friday, Liberty,
Liberty
Oregon,
or
it's ten
Oregon.
ten. That's the only
Yeah.
other one.
But that would be a very funny end to the weekend or the Friday night spot if Ben Kurt has to watch Sparty go down and we're right there laughing in his face. But like I said, I do think Michigan State's going to win this one. I like Michigan State to make a pretty good run in this thing. But if you had to make me pick 115 over a 2, it would probably be this one. Bryant's frisky, 8th in pace of play. We've seen Michigan State at times have their shooting woes. If they're not shooting the ball well and Bryant's able to make this a track meet, get up and down, hit a bunch of threes, Michigan State could be in some trouble. I think this one is one that's like interesting at the first half, as you like to say, Joe. Get that like alert from the app, like like Michigan State on the rope, like down 2 at halftime, something like that. I could see this being that game. Maybe even look to take like Bryant first half spread, or even sprinkle on like first half money line. As we said, this is the end of the Friday night basically, so you'll have a lot of money or no money. Like you might be chasing whatever you want to do at this stage of the night. But I assume everyone's going to be liquidated at this stage. Bryant could be a fun little first half money line play or something to have a fun way to kind of end the night there. But I do like Michigan State to eventually move on and win this thing. All right, Joe, to wrap up the South region, we're not going to go through every game, obviously, one by one. We'll hit the games for next weekend, the following week. But Elite Eight prediction, your team to go to the Final Four. Who do you have in this one?
So every year, Coyle, I do my gut reaction right away. Once the bracket comes out, fill it out, just let it sit. I did this before I knew a certain star guard named Keyshawn Gilbert would be out. However, when I did my gut reaction bracket, I had Nick McClay's Iowa State Cyclones advancing to the Final Four. I had them beating Ole Miss in the round of 32. As I said, I guess whoever wins that, I don't believe in that team. Whoever wins that game. I had them upsetting Sparty in the Sweet 16, and then I had them beating Auburn in the Elite Eight to move on to the Final Four.
I don't know if McClay would agree with you on that. He has anointed them dead.
I mean, but like I said, at this point, the best part about this, if I told you, oh, Florida Atlantic's going to go to the Final Four, you would have been like, no. Like, who knows? Obviously, now now they know that Gilbert's out, I'm going to definitely tweak my bracket. I probably won't have them going to the Final Four, but for the sake of the show, I will pick Iowa State to upset Auburn. My logic behind that was when I was filling it out, Sparty with their 3-point shooting. I've said this all year. I cannot trust them as a team to go to the Final Four. That's not a shot at their talent and their coaching. I just can't trust the team. I know their 3-point shooters got a little bit better, but still, I can't trust them to go to the Final Four. And Auburn, even though I think they're going to get right a little bit, we've seen it when they're stepping up in competition with these big boys. It seems like when they're playing these really good teams lately, they're kind of out of gas. Like they almost played such a tough schedule. Like that's my one thing concerning Auburn, which Cole, you and I kind of talked about a couple weeks ago with the SEC. Like,
yeah,
are you going to get to a point where you're out of gas? Like Auburn, I have them going, Louisville in the round of 32. I have them playing UC San Diego, which no chance that's hitting now because it's a Seth Davis. And then I have them obviously in the Elite Eight against Iowa State. But you're playing 3 tournament games, especially that Louisville game in the round of 32, where you're going to be playing a game in the state of Kentucky, and then UC San Diego at that point will, if they get that far, will be 32-4. And even though I believe the Sweet Six, the South is in Atlanta, you're still going to have a lot of neutral fans that are going to root for UC San Diego to pull off the upset. So, I don't know. I wouldn't be shocked if Auburn goes to the Final Four, but I'm going with Iowa State to upset Auburn and make it to the Final Four as of now.
Yeah, we'll talk about it in our next episode, but that's one of the reasons I'm looking to actually fade Florida. I think I said it like a month ago. Whatever team wins the SEC tournament, I might look to fade them actually in the NCAA tournament. Not in terms of losing in the first round to the 16 seed, but maybe in that 8-9 winner in the next one, just because that's just a gauntlet, man. And these teams, you can say all you want about them being battle tested, yeah, but Florida, we'll talk about it in the next one, but UConn or Oklahoma, I think, could knock off Florida. So that's going to be the most interesting thing, I think, big picture-wise, to look at in this tournament. 14 SEC teams. How many actually make a run? How many of these teams go deep and find their way to the Sweet 16 or just the second weekend in general and make a run to the Final Four, or are they just kind of worn out from the gauntlet of the schedule that they played throughout the year? But my pick to go to the Elite Eight, I'm going to have Michigan State, the Spartans, knocking off Auburn, plus 550 to go to the Final Four. January, February, Izzo, blah, blah, blah. It's just a Michigan State team that has proven me wrong kind of time and time again. They've found ways to win games in many different ways. Like when they're not shooting well, they can still defend. I saw yesterday they're 25-1 when they score 75 or more points. Like it's a team that I think can beat you 54-52, or they can beat you 80-78 if need be. Jace Richardson has really taken over the second half of the year. It's a fun team that I think knows their roles as well. Like Cohen Carr is a guy that probably could go somewhere else and shoot the ball a bunch more times, but he runs the floor hard. He blocks shots and he dunks the basketball for this team, plays his role. They're all kind of bought in on their spots. Trey Holloman is a dog. He's a guy that gets in your face and is kind of the leader, the alpha, I think, of that team. And you have one of, if not, you could argue the best coach in the sport leading the way. So I like Michigan State there, plus 550. I think that's a great price for the 2 seed. Was surprised to see that. Auburn, an overwhelming favorite there at minus 150. Your Cyclones at plus 750. But I really like Michigan State there, plus 550. I think that's a good number. So that's my first Final Four representative. That'll wrap up our South region preview. We'll be jumping right in to the West next, joined by our first guest of the night. But any last second comments, Joe, on the South, big picture wise, before we head over to the East?
No, I mean, I think we've kind of hit on everything here. This is at the end of the day, if you like chalk, the one thing I will say quick, just so I can get it out now before the rest of the tournament, the one thing that does not scare me, but the one thing that is interesting to keep an eye on, the top teams are so good this year compared to years past. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if this is a very chalky tournament. I hope that's not the case, but I think you can even kind of get that in this region very early, especially, with if the 12 and the 13, like everyone's fan favorites, like if Michigan and A&M, advance, I could see this being a very chalky region because I don't see, like the Cinderella could be a UNC team going to the Elite Eight. Like, but outside of that, I think this it has the potential to be a very chalky region, but we could talk about that another day.
All right, well, that'll do it for the South region for the 2025 NCAA Tournament preview in the round of 64. We'll be back just shortly here streaming for the West region.